Daniel stepped out of his car, rolling his shoulders after the long drive home. His business trip had been unexpectedly cut short, but he didn't mind. A quiet evening in his own bed sounded perfect. He pictured Melissa curled up on the couch, maybe waiting for him with a glass of wine. The thought brought a faint smile to his lips. As he unlocked the front door, the house was oddly quiet. No television, no music, just a heavy silence that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He set his suitcase down gently and listened. Then he heard it. Muffled voices, a laugh, the unmistakable creak of their bed upstairs. For a moment, Daniel's body refused to move. His fingers curled into fists, his breath hitched, and his heart pounded so violently that he swore he could hear it echo through the empty hallway. A cold wave of clarity washed over him. He could turn around, pretend he never heard anything. But no, that wasn't who he was. Step by step, he ascended the stairs, his movements silent, controlled. Years of discipline, negotiating high-stakes deals, handling pressure, had taught him that emotions cloud judgment. And right now, he needed clarity. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, the dim glow of the bedside lamp spilling into the hallway. He didn't need to push it open further to know what was happening inside. Melissa's voice, soft, breathless, sent a dagger through his chest. Then another voice, deeper, familiar. Ethan, his own brother! Daniel exhaled slowly, steadying himself before taking the final step forward. He pushed the door open. The scene before him would be burned into his mind forever. Melissa, tangled in the sheets, her golden hair cascading over the pillow. Ethan, his face twisted in shock, frozen in place. For a brief second, none of them moved. Then Melissa gasped, scrambling to cover herself. Daniel, Ethan bolted upright. Shit, this isn't... Daniel held up a hand, silencing them. He should have felt rage, betrayal, devastation. But instead, he felt something far colder. A quiet detachment. A slow smile formed on his lips. You two deserve each other. With that, he turned and walked out. But as he descended the stairs, one thought consumed him. They would regret this. Not just with guilt, but with consequences. Daniel drove through the empty streets, the city lights blurring past him as he processed what had just happened. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white, but his expression remained eerily calm. Melissa and Ethan thought they had won, that they had gotten away with their betrayal. They had no idea what was coming. He didn't waste time drowning in anger. Anger was reckless. It was impulsive. It made men lash out, throw punches, and get arrested for things that wouldn't fix a damn thing. No, Daniel was different. He had spent his entire career strategizing, thinking 3 moves ahead. And if there was one thing he knew how to do, it was dismantling people's lives without them even realizing it was happening. The first thing he did was drive straight to his office. He needed to be somewhere controlled, somewhere where his emotions couldn't dictate his next move. The soft hum of the city skyline through the massive windows of his corner office steadied him. He opened his laptop and got to work. First, he secured his finances. He moved assets, rerouted investments, and ensured that Melissa would leave their marriage with absolutely nothing. He had always been the primary provider. She had quit her job years ago, preferring the luxury of his success. That luxury was about to disappear. Next, he gathered evidence. He combed through their shared accounts, pulling messages, transaction records, even timestamps that showed when Ethan had been in their home. His security system had done most of the work for him. Cameras discreetly placed throughout the house had caught everything. He downloaded the footage, his eyes scanning every betrayal in high definition. Then he made a call. Claire, he said, his voice measured. Ethan's fiancée hesitated on the other end. Daniel, it's late. What's wrong? I need to see you. There was silence, then a quiet sigh. I have a feeling this isn't a social visit. No, he admitted. It's about Ethan. And you need to hear it from me. An hour later, he met Claire at a small cafe, one of those quiet places where no one paid attention to whispered conversations. She arrived wrapped in a trench coat, her auburn hair pulled into a loose ponytail. When she sat down across from him, he could already see the concern in her eyes. Tell me, she said, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. Daniel slid his phone across the table. One tap and the video played. Claire's face remained composed at first, her breath slow and steady. But as the seconds passed, her eyes darkened. She exhaled sharply, setting the phone down before the video could finish. How long? She asked, her voice strained. A year, maybe more. She nodded slowly, processing. Then, to his surprise, she let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Here I was, planning a wedding. Daniel leaned forward. Ethan and Melissa think they're untouchable. They think they've won. Claire's expression hardened. They haven't. A slow smile curved on Daniel's lips. That was exactly what he needed to hear. Together they planned. The next morning, while Melissa and Ethan likely woke up feeling smug, Daniel was already in motion. An anonymous email was sent to both their families, complete with time-stamped photos and evidence. His legal team prepared the divorce papers, ensuring Melissa would leave with nothing but regret. Claire, in the meantime, had her own plan. One that involved ending her engagement in the most public way possible. But that was just the beginning, because Daniel wasn't interested in just exposing them. He wanted to ruin them, and by the time he was finished, Melissa and Ethan wouldn't just lose him and Claire. They'd lose everything. The morning after the betrayal, Daniel sat at his desk, sipping black coffee as the city stirred to life outside his window. To anyone else, it was an ordinary day, but for Melissa and Ethan, it was the beginning of the end. His phone vibrated. A message from Claire. Claire, sent the email. My mom just called me in shock. Ethan's about to have a bad day. Daniel smirked, setting his cup down. Claire had done her part flawlessly. The email, complete with photos, messages, and timestamps, had been sent not only to Ethan's parents, but also to Melissa's family. There was no undoing that damage. While Ethan scrambled to explain himself, Daniel focused on the next step, ensuring Melissa lost more than just a husband. He opened his laptop, navigating to the company directory of Melissa's workplace. She prided herself on her career, always boasting about her status in the firm. What she never realized, though, was how fragile her position really was. A carefully worded email, sent from an anonymous account, landed in the inbox of her company's HR department. Attached were messages and photos proving her affair. Not just the personal scandal, but the ethical breach of bringing her lover into their home while still pretending to be the perfect wife. 10 minutes later, Daniel received a reply. HR manager, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take matters of professional integrity very seriously. This will be investigated immediately. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Now it was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, at Ethan's apartment, Ethan woke up to his phone buzzing relentlessly. At first, he ignored it, groaning as he stretched out in bed. But the second he checked his notifications, a cold wave of panic hit him. Mom, what the hell is this, Ethan? Dad, call me. Now. Claire, I hope it was worth it. He sat up, heart hammering, scrolling through the dozens of unread messages from friends and family. Then he saw the email. His hands trembled as he opened it, staring at the damning photos of himself and Melissa. He swore under his breath. Melissa stirred beside him. What's wrong? Ethan turned to her, his face pale. We're screwed. She sat up, frowning. What are you talking about? Wordlessly, he handed her the phone. Her eyes widened as she scrolled, her breath hitching. Oh my God! Then, her own phone lit up with calls. Her mother, her sister, even her boss. Melissa swallowed hard. Daniel did this. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. No shit! Melissa dialed Daniel's number with shaky fingers. It went straight to voicemail. She cursed under her breath. We have to do damage control. Now. But there was no control in the damage. The public humiliation. That evening, Claire executed her part of the plan. Ethan had been scheduled to meet her parents for dinner, a seemingly normal gathering. He assumed she wouldn't show. He was wrong. When he arrived at the upscale restaurant, Claire was already there, sitting beside her father. But she wasn't alone. Daniel was there too. Ethan froze in the doorway. Claire stood up, clinking her glass for attention. The restaurant quieted. I just want to take a moment, she said, her voice steady but ice cold, to thank everyone for being here. I was supposed to announce something special tonight. She glanced at Ethan, her expression unreadable. An engagement. Ethan swallowed hard. But instead, Claire continued, I have something else to share. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and then held it up for the entire table to see. The damning photos. Ethan and Melissa, tangled in sheets that weren't their own. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ethan's mother covered her mouth. His father's face turned red with fury. Ethan stepped forward. Claire, let's talk about this privately. No, she said sharply. There's nothing to talk about. You're a liar, a cheat, and we're done. With that, she tossed her engagement ring onto the table. It clattered against the glassware, a sharp, final sound. Ethan stood there, humiliated, as his own family looked at him with disgust. Melissa's fall. The next morning, Melissa arrived at work, head held high. If she could just power through, she could find a way to fix this. But the moment she stepped into the office, she knew something was wrong. Her coworkers avoided eye contact. Whispers followed her as she walked to her desk. Then, A message popped up in her inbox. HR meeting, urgent. Her stomach dropped. 30 minutes later, she was sitting across from the HR director who slid a printed email across the table. These accusations are serious, Melissa. I will explain, she stammered. The director folded her hands. Melissa, we hold our employees to a high ethical standard. Given the nature of this scandal and the company's reputation, we have no choice but to let you go. Melissa's breath caught. You're firing me? You'll receive 2 weeks severance, but as of today, you are no longer employed here. Her mind spun. No job, no security, and soon, no husband. She stumbled out of the office, her vision blurring. Her phone rang. It was Ethan. She ignored it. For the first time, she realized what Daniel had done. He hadn't just exposed them, he had destroyed them. Meanwhile, Daniel sat back in his chair, watching the fallout unfold. The phone calls, the public humiliation, the severed ties. Melissa and Ethan had underestimated him. They had nothing left. And Daniel, he was finally free. Daniel stood on the balcony of his penthouse suite, the city stretching out beneath him in a sea of glittering lights. The wind was crisp, carrying with it the scent of rain on the horizon. He exhaled, feeling lighter than he had in years. The plan had unfolded flawlessly. Melissa had been fired, Ethan was publicly humiliated, her families had turned against them. But Daniel wasn't done yet. His phone buzzed. Claire. Claire! It's done. He's crashing at a motel now. Pathetic. Daniel smirked. Ethan, once the golden boy, reduced to scrounging for a place to sleep. He tapped out a reply. Daniel, good. He deserves worse. Claire, Melissa called me, begged me to talk to you. That made him pause. Not because he cared, but because it was so predictable. Melissa had always been entitled, always assumed that if she cried enough, someone, Daniel, her parents, the world, would fix things for her. Not this time. Daniel, what did she say? Claire, that she made a mistake, that she's sorry, that she still loves you. Daniel barked out a laugh. Still loves him? The same woman who had spent a year sneaking around with his brother? The same woman who had looked him in the eye and lied? Daniel, delete her number. Claire already did. That was the thing about betrayal. The people who inflicted it never thought about consequences until they were drowning in them. Melissa's desperation. Melissa sat in the darkened apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and empty wine bottles. She had tried calling Daniel 5 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. She had lost her job, her reputation, and now she was about to lose her home. The lease was under Daniel's name. The credit card she had used so freely, canceled. The savings? All his. She had nothing. Clutching her phone, she scrolled through old photos, vacations, anniversaries, laughing selfies. She had taken it all for granted. She had thought Daniel would always be there, that he would fight for her, that he would never really let her go, but he had. And the realization hit her harder than she expected. Tears blurred her vision as she sent one final text. Melissa, please, can we talk just once? The message delivered, but the response never came. Ethan's rock bottom. Ethan leaned against the motel room's peeling wall, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His bank account was nearly empty. His father had cut him off. Claire was gone. And Melissa? She was spiraling. He could hear it in her voice, messages, the desperation creeping in. His phone rang. Ethan, a familiar voice said, their father. Ethan sat up. Dad, I don't want excuses, his father cut him off. You've humiliated this family. Your mother won't even say your name. Ethan swallowed hard. I screwed up, I know that. But nothing, his father snapped. You're on your own. You're not welcome at home. You're not getting another cent from us. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone, his chest tightening. He had lost everything. And the worst part? Daniel had made it happen. Daniel's final move, the last step, was simple. Melissa still had a few contacts in high places. Daniel knew she would try to rebuild. Maybe find another cushy job, maybe weasel her way into another wealthy man's life. So he made sure she couldn't. One final email, it wasn't just to her former employer, it was to every major firm in her industry. Anonymous, of course, just a concerned party warning them of her unethical behavior. By the end of the week, Melissa had been blacklisted. Ethan, he's already a joke. A man who had it all and threw it away. Daniel took one last look at the city before stepping back inside. Melissa and Ethan had destroyed his marriage, his trust, his family. Now, he had destroyed them, and for the first time in months, he felt at peace. Daniel sat in his new apartment, the faint hum of classical music filling the space. The sleek, minimalist decor suited him. Clean, unburdened, a reflection of the life he was now stepping into. His old house, the one where he had discovered the betrayal, no longer held any power over him. He had signed the final sale papers that morning, cutting the last thread that tied him to his past. Melissa and Ethan were nothing more than a lesson now. His phone vibrated on the marble counter. A message from Claire. Claire, it's done. She's moving out of state. Daniel exhaled, staring at the message for a moment before typing his response. Daniel, good. Let her run. Melissa had tried everything. Calling his friends, reaching out to mutual acquaintances, even showing up at his old workplace. But Daniel had made sure that every door she knocked on remained closed. Without a job, without a financial safety net, and without anyone left to manipulate, she had no choice but to leave town. Ethan, on the other hand, had spiraled faster than anyone expected. Claire had told him about the fight Ethan had with their father, how he had begged for a second chance, only to be met with silence. The golden son had been cast out, just as he deserved. Daniel didn't revel in their suffering. He wasn't a cruel man, but he did believe in consequences. A new beginning? He took a sip of his whiskey, letting the warmth settle in his chest as he leaned back against the couch. He had won, not just in the sense that he had exposed them, humiliated them, and ensured they faced the fallout. He had won because he had let him go. For months, their betrayal had consumed him. He had replayed that night over and over, let the anger sharpen him into something cold and unrecognizable. But now, sitting here, he felt lighter. Revenge had been necessary. But it was over. His thoughts were interrupted by another message. This one from an unknown number. Unknown, I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I need to say it. I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am. Melissa. He stared at the message for a long time, his fingers hovering over the screen. But instead of responding, he simply deleted it. Some things didn't deserve a reply. The final move. Daniel stood, stretching as he glanced out the window. The city was alive, pulsing with opportunity, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking back. There were no more loose ends, no more ghosts to chase. Tomorrow he had a meeting with a new client, a fresh project to throw himself into. Tomorrow life continued, and this time it was entirely his own.